Thanks for joining me on this video tutorial where I aim to show you a kind of typical workflow that I'd use as a mixture of using Lightroom and Photoshop, which are part of Adobe's Creative Cloud suite of bits of software. Okay, so starting with Lightroom, I'm going to import a photo that I made a while back. So let's scroll down, look for the right one here. Okay, and here we are. Take a moment to load there. So I'm going to uncheck the whole lot and just go for having a look at a couple that I did of the River Dart in Totnes, around Veer Island here, and looking down the Hemsley channel. So I'm going to click on Import now, and these will come initially into this library area here. The next thing I'm going to do is to go to the develop mode. The library mode is good for kind of having a cursory glance of looking at things, checking the histograms here on the right to see what our tonal values are, and checking that we haven't got anything clipped either in the shadow side, which is this side of the histogram, or in the highlights, which is the far side of the histogram. And I'm also going to look at shapes as well. There's kind of a bit more shadows going on here than in this particular one, but I'm going to open them all in the develop mode. One thing I can do at this point is to put some keyword tags in, a bit like you might be used to that if you've done things around having your own website. It's quite a good way of recording a particular location, so if you're then looking back for photos later on, thinking I remember I took one in such and such a place, then it can help you track that. You can search for the tags or keywords. So click in the develop mode. On these extremes here we can see clipping of the highlights and shadows. So this will show shadow clipping and the highlight clipping. So a little kind of warning colour will come up there as a cursor. So it's showing that I've got quite a lot of shadowy tones, which we can see from the picture, kind of dominated by the shadows of the trees here, shadows of the buildings. These lighter tones coming from here and here, and along this wall, on this building as well, and some of the lighter tones in here, probably about here, on this image. So we need to kind of be, aware of these things. So the next things I'm going to be looking for is, first of all, scrolling right down to lens corrections. So I'm going to look at the profile and basic options of here. So the first thing I'm going to do is remove the chromatic aberration, which is kind of seen as a colour fringes on some of the sort of edges between buildings, particularly on the sort of transition between the land and the sky. We tend to see that, which would show up in a large print, and that's due to kind of refraction going on in the the outer edge of the lens. Without going into too much detail about physics there, it's one of those things that's common to a lot of lenses. And the more money we spend on lenses, the more they try and reduce chromatic aberration by coatings on the lens. So I'm also going to look at the profile bit as well. So I'm going to look at the profile of my lens there. I've clicked on Pentax. Sometimes it comes up with your camera thing already. Other times you have to search for the manufacturer of your lens. So keep that on Pentax. So if I move that on and off, we can see a slight effect there that it's actually lightening the corners, removing some of the sort of natural vignetting of the lens. One thing we need to be careful of when we do that, and another thing it can affect, is distortion of either what's called pin cushion or barrel distortion, depending on the curvature of the lens and the effects of the different focal length of your lens settings you've got as well. So sometimes it helps sort of straighten things out in an image, other times it sort of seems to bring too much light into the corners and probably draws attention away from the image itself, you know, the focal sort of point of your image. In this particular case, I'm going to leave it in. Sometimes in doing its lens corrections, it will sort of slightly over brighten things, so just be aware of, you know, potential highlight clipping in that situation. What am I going to look at next? Well, I'm going to check my colour tones. The green looks pretty naturalistic in both the trees and the leaves. Sometimes I will, you know, kind of fine tune that. With this hue, saturation, and luminance box, which is in our little sort of taskbar down here. So looking at the hue itself, I can play about with those green tones to make them look lighter, or go into kind of Incredible Hulk sort of scenario. I tend to bring my greens down slightly due to the kind of sort of inherent settings that I've got on my camera at the moment, which are kind of vibrant settings and sometimes make the green look a little bit strange. The other tones like the blues and so on I'm pretty happy with, so kind of going to leave those as they are at the moment. I kind of like the shadows. I could lighten those if I wanted to. In this kind of tonal curves area, it's possible to do it in other areas here. So specific sliders, say for the blacks, I could, if you see that, it's now lightening the image quite drastically and looking kind of unrealistic. So clarity is another one as well, which affects the mid-tone values, and it's quite intelligent sort of algorithms in that. We can see that we're starting to go crazy. Highlight warning on both the shadows is kind of kicked off there. Somewhere it's not necessary to use it for all images, particularly if we want to do people. We might actually want to, you know, soften those sort of mid-tonal contrasts and bring that down slightly if you've got people's skin textures in there. It can be kind of flattering. So I tend to vary between somewhere around 5 and 17 at the most. So I don't go too crazy with that. And we can see that it's affecting some of those mid-tones. If you look at this area of the building here, as I slide that along, and both in the trees as well, it's affecting those tonal values. So these sort of mid-tone to sort of greens and so on, and again on the buildings there. So I'm going to leave that about there for a moment. Vibrance is a brilliant one. It is much better choice than saturation, in my personal opinion. If we kick the saturation up, we can see that we've gone again for really cartoon, sort of insane colours that just aren't realistic. Whereas if I play around with the vibrance, it's kind of, you can see it's affecting the blue there. I've gone kind of too far with it now. But if I bring that down to maybe somewhere around 5 to 7, I've kind of brought out some of the, you know, the natural tones that I would have seen through my polarized filter at the time. And it's basically some clever maths that instead of overcooking things, the slightly duller tones, it's bringing those out in a more vibrant way, and it's, you know, very intelligent sort of maths going on there. But, you know, don't overcook it. And definitely much better use, I think, than playing around with the saturation slider. If anything, I'd be later on in Photoshop. You know, the times I'm looking at saturation, I'm tending to reduce saturation in things rather than overcook things. I can also play around with the brightness, but we can see again we've got clipping on the right hand side there, make it slightly lighter than it's come out. The thing with raw files is they tend to look a little flat and mute on the colours compared to how you remember the scene being, and that's because this data has not been compressed by the camera like an in-camera JPEG would do. If you've set your camera to JPEG setting and not RAW, then we're much more limited in playing around with tonal values, playing around with colour values such as hue and saturation and vibrance and so on, because the camera's made a lot of decisions on your part. And that's all going on in the background, based on the kind of colour sort of settings or schemes that your camera offers, such as normal and vibrant and sepia and black and white and so on. So if you think you might want to do a black and white version, it's kind of far better to do that initially as a colour photo and then do it in an editing program such as Lightroom or Photoshop, or a combination of the two, or other kind of freeware open source ones that are about. I don't feel any great need to do a lot more with this image at the moment. I can play with these tonal curves manually as well and kind of make it sort of darker and more dramatic if I want to, but I'm not going to do that. And again, I could play with the mid-tones if I want to make it brighter, but I'm going to bring those back down. So I feel quite happy with this image. So at the moment I'm going to click on File and Export, and I'm going to save that in this particular case to a new folder. So I can click on New Folder. I'm going to put River Dart Morning at Veer Island. I'm going to copy that as well because I can use that as the title for the photo itself. Slight error there. Let's try that again. Again. Okay, so we now save that. I'm going to also remember to change the title because a while ago I was working on one for fishing trawler, and obviously we haven't got any fishing trawlers in this picture. So I'm going to paste that title on. I'm going to put in here not sharpened because we want to sharpen things for print or sharpen things for web version separately. Coming down this sort of options in terms of saving, I'm going to save this as a high resolution TIFF file, which is the closest we can get to RAW for sort of fine tuning things or doing a different version of an image later on. And compared to JPEGs, which when you start re-editing those can bring in all kinds of digital artifacts, if you've done it, replayed with it 10-15 times, it starts to degrade the image, whereas with a TIFF it's not going to do that. I'm going to keep that as a bit depth of 16 bits, which is good level of information saved in the file. Saving it in the Adobe RGB color space, which is really good for prints. If we go to save as a web size version, we're going to reduce the image. We're going to change that to sRGB, which is really important, otherwise it messes the colors up. So I'm going to click Export in this particular instance. Okay, now that's done, I'm going to open the file in Photoshop. So we go up to the part of the computer that's in. So I'm going to look for River Dart and Veer Island Morning, so I've just been looking at. And here's my image. Okay, one thing I will check for both in the water and the sky is any dust were showing. So we're going to have a scan around for that. Leaving the leaves in is probably a good idea. And I'm checking in the sky for any dust spots. Again, sort of 50% image resolution is pretty good. I can see by the edge of the screen here and these poles that the building's nice and upright, so I don't have to do any rotations or tilting. So what I'm going to do now is put another layer on to sharpen this. So I'm going to click on, so I went on to layer and duplicate to do that, just to explain that. I'm going to click on now other and high pass. This is my sort of favoured method of sort of sharpening for the main print. Choosing a radius size of 3.5 pixels, which gives me good definition around the edges without big sort of halos that are going to leave a nasty border around things. So looking at the 50% level is quite good to see how sharp your image is. So click on OK, and then I need to go into Layer, Style, Blending Options, and click Soft Light. In this particular case, it's my sort of chosen one. I'm going to go for a value of 99%, and you can see the image has been sharpened. And we haven't got sort of glaring halos around, which can happen if you go a bit too crazy with the sharpening. So I'm going to say Layer, Flatten, File, Save As, and I'm going to change this to High Pass version. So it's still in the Adobe format here. So I've clicked on Save. So this is my saving it as a TIFF. And we're done. Okay, to save it for a web version, I'm going to go to Image Size, change this to 21.5%, based on the size of my images from 14 megapixel camera sensor and the size of the average screen, and it's going to look pretty good. Then click on OK. So it shrunk the image, which is what you'd naturally expect. So you can click on Fit Screen there now. Sometimes we might need to put an extra bit of sharpening on just to fine tune it because we reduced the image size. But I'm going to go to Edit, Convert Profile, and save to sRGB format. There's lots of different ones here. So I'm going to go for sRGB. Okay, I'm going to change the image mode to 8 bits per channel. And we're going to click. Yeah, I should have done that with the print one as well. If I'm going to actually print it out, I should save it as 8 bits because it won't print at 16. So we click on File and Save As if I'm happy with the sharpening there. But let's just have a look. So we go to Sharpen, Smart Sharpen. Got a setting of 17%, radius of 1.3. Don't need to reduce any noise. It's not a noisy image. And click on OK. And it has made it, slightly sharper. I can fade that if I want here. So you can click on Fade, Smart Sharpen, and we can sort of just about see the effects that's sort of having. Leave it on maybe 95%. Another thing I'm going to do is sign it. So putting a layer on, clicked on the text button on the side. I'm going to put Phil Hemsley on there. I can move that about. Put that in this little corner so it's not distracting attention for people that might be interested in it. Layer, and flatten. So we've done the colour profile, we've reduced the image size. I'm going to save it as a JPEG now for web version. So I'm going to put sRGB. I'm going to click on the JPEG format, click on Save, and they've got different options of high, low, medium, maximum. 9 high is pretty good. It'll give a nice, good quality image for a website or social media things of various channels. But it's a very, if someone tries to print it out, it's going to print out probably about half the size of this window here. So, they might complain, but they shouldn't be nicking your stuff in the first place. So click on OK, and there we are, job done. Okay, a million and one things you could play with on Photoshop and Lightroom. There's other menus apart from the essentials, such as photography, which comes up with all sorts of options like levels, curves, black and white versions, all a million and one things. But for now, we'll stick with the basics. So I hope you found that useful, and I'll be doing some more tutorials in the near future. And enjoy.